You're listening to Mr. Dark Files, where fear finds you in the dark. Tonight's horror stories begin now. It started with a weekend plan to clear my head. I'd been working double shifts for the past 3 months, trying to cover rent and keep up with bills after my roommate bailed on me. When my cousin Greg offered me his old cabin up in Vermont for the weekend, said it was totally off-grid, quiet and surrounded by nothing but trees, I didn't hesitate. A couple of days with no phone, no people, no noise, just a small cabin, a bag of groceries, a book, and my thoughts. Sounded perfect. The drive out took longer than expected. The roads narrowed into gravel trails, and eventually I found myself bouncing along a dirt path that barely looked wide enough for a car. There were no signs, no phone signal, no streetlights, just miles of tall, silent trees pressing in on both sides. I reached the cabin just before sunset. It was small, rustic, and isolated, just like Greg said. One room, wood stove, rain barrel for water, solar panels for basic power. A little worn, but solid. The first night was uneventful. I ate some canned chili, read a few chapters of an old paperback, and listened to the sound of rain tapping on the tin roof. It was peaceful in that eerie, stretched silence kind of way. I slept well. No dreams. The next morning, I decided to hike the woods behind the cabin. Greg had told me there was a trail. Barely a trail. He laughed, but it looped through the trees and circled back around to a small creek. I figured it'd be a nice way to stretch my legs. I left around 9 a.m. with my water bottle, a granola bar, and a folding knife clipped to my pocket out of habit. The trail was easy to lose. Sometimes it disappeared completely under the brush, but it didn't bother me. The forest was quiet and calming, and I felt like I had the entire world to myself. That illusion broke around 11 a.m. I was walking down a narrow stretch of trail when I saw something off to my right, maybe 30 feet through the trees. A shape, human. They were standing still, facing away from me, just barely visible through the branches. I stopped. "Hey," I called, a little unsure. No response. The figure didn't move. I stepped forward slowly, trying to get a better look. It was a man, middle-aged, heavy-set, wearing a dark green jacket and jeans. His arms hung limp at his sides, and his head tilted slightly downward. He stood like someone who had fallen asleep on their feet. "Are you okay?" I called again. He turned his head, just a little, but didn't answer. Something about the way he moved made me freeze. There was a kind of weight in it, like his body was stiff. Then I noticed something else. He had no pack, no gear, no trail markers, just standing there in the middle of the woods with nothing. I backed away slowly. "Okay, well, take care." I turned and continued down the trail, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe he was a local. Maybe he was hiking without gear. Maybe he was just weird. But the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. By noon, I made it to the creek Greg mentioned. The water was shallow but fast, and the area was peaceful. I sat on a large rock and pulled out my granola bar. That's when I heard movement behind me. Quick, deliberate footsteps crunching in the leaves. I turned fast, heart skipping. But no one was there. I stood up slowly, scanning the trees. My fingers hovered over the knife clipped to my pocket. Everything was quiet again. But the stillness had changed. Before it was natural. Now it felt staged, like something was holding its breath, waiting. I didn't stick around. I retraced the trail, faster this time. I didn't care if I lost the path. I just needed to head west, and I'd eventually hit the cabin. I walked for nearly an hour without seeing anyone, or anything. The tension started to fade a little, and I convinced myself I'd just imagined the noise, the man, the footsteps. Maybe I was just on edge from being alone. Then I found the noose. It was hanging from a low branch, thick rope, tied into a perfect loop, right across the trail, like someone had taken their time to put it there. It wasn't old either. The rope was clean, fresh. I stopped, staring at it. It wasn't some forgotten hunting trap. It was man-sized, neck-sized. That's when I heard it. A soft click behind me, like a boot against stone. I turned. The man in the green jacket was 10 feet away, standing in the brush. We locked eyes. He didn't speak, didn't smile. His eyes were glassy and empty. Then he took one step toward me. I ran. I bolted off the trail, crashing through branches and brush, ignoring the stabs of thorns and the burning in my lungs. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to put distance between me and him. I ran until my legs gave out, and I collapsed behind a fallen log, chest heaving, heart racing. The forest was silent again. I waited and waited. No footsteps, no voices, no sign of him. Eventually I crept out and started moving west again. It took over 2 hours to find the cabin. When I finally saw it through the trees, I almost collapsed from relief. I got inside, locked the door, pulled the curtains, and sat on the floor shaking for a long time. That night I didn't sleep. I kept the lights off. I sat in the dark with a kitchen knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, ears straining for the slightest sound outside. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a soft knock, 3 slow taps on the cabin door. I didn't move. No one called out, no footsteps followed, just the knock and silence. Eventually the sun rose. I left everything behind and walked the 6 miles back to the main road. Didn't wait, didn't look back. Greg never mentioned anything like that happening before. He still doesn't believe me. Says maybe I had a nightmare, maybe I imagined it all. But I know what I saw. There was nothing supernatural about that man. He was real, and he was hunting someone. I moved to Merrow Hill to get away from people. After 10 years of city noise, late-night sirens and upstairs neighbors who seemed to wear concrete boots, the idea of a quiet town with 1 gas station and a population under 500 sounded like heaven. I bought an old fixer-upper house at the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom place with a detached garage, overgrown backyard, and a back porch that faced a wide stretch of empty woods. It was peaceful in that way, where you could stand on your porch and not hear another living soul for hours. My nearest neighbor, Dale, lived half a mile down the road. Retired trucker, big into hunting. We'd chat from time to time if we saw each other in town, but I mostly kept to myself. I worked remotely as a copywriter, stocked up on groceries once every 2 weeks, and spent my evenings either on the porch with a beer, or inside with a podcast and a bag of chips. It was simple. I liked it that way. Then about 6 months in, I started noticing weird things, subtle at first. The first time, I chalked it up to me being tired. I'd come in from the porch one night and found my back door, locked with both a latch and a deadbolt, was open. Not wide, just a crack, enough that the warm air inside had started leaking out into the cold. I was sure I'd locked it. I always did, but maybe I'd forgotten that night. Then came the second incident a few nights later. I went to bed around midnight, and when I got up to use the bathroom at 2:30, I saw the porch light was off. Thing is, I'd just replaced the bulb 2 days prior. I went outside with a flashlight and found the bulb unscrewed, sitting neatly on the railing, not shattered, not burned out, just unscrewed, like someone had deliberately twisted it free and set it down. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning I went into town and bought a set of security cameras, cheap, battery-powered ones. I didn't tell anyone, just installed them quietly around the perimeter of the house. Front door, back porch, garage, and one on the rear corner of the house facing the woods. For the next 2 nights nothing happened. I checked the camera feeds obsessively. Nothing but squirrels and wind-blown leaves. I figured maybe I'd just been paranoid. Maybe the bulb came loose from wind or vibrations. Then, on the 3rd night, something triggered the back porch camera. It was 3:12 a.m. when the motion alert woke me up. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the feed, and hit play. The video was short, just 16 seconds. At first nothing, then a figure stepped into view. It was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. His face was turned away from the camera, but what chilled me was how he moved. Slow, careful, practiced. He didn't hesitate. He walked right up to the back door and reached for the handle, tried it once, then again, then stepped back, and just stood there, watching, not knocking, not speaking, just staring at the door like he could will it open. Then, as if something spooked him, he turned and walked off toward the woods. I sat there in bed, heart pounding, phone clutched tight in my hand. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, just kept watching that clip over and over. When morning came, I called Dale. He didn't pick up. I got dressed, grabbed my pistol, and drove down to his place. His truck was gone, but I saw fresh boot prints in the dirt near his shed. I left a note on his door and went back home. That night, I stayed up. I loaded my pistol, locked every door and window, and sat by the front window with the lights off, just watching the yard. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of wind outside. I jumped, but nothing came, until just after 2 a.m. I heard a noise. From the back porch, a slow, deliberate knock, just 3 taps. I didn't move, didn't make a sound, just listened. Another knock, same rhythm, 3 precise, slow taps, then silence. I waited for what felt like an hour before I finally got up, crept to the kitchen, and checked the feed. The back porch camera was dark, completely black. I checked the others, still working, just that one was dead. I went to the back window and peeked out through the curtain. The porch light bulb was gone. Not broken, gone. I didn't go outside that night. I wanted to storm out there with my flashlight and pistol and scare whoever the hell was playing games with me, but some instinct in the back of my head told me not to. Not yet. That whoever he was, he wanted me to come outside. So I waited and watched. By morning the porch light was still missing. No bulb, no sign of damage, just a bare socket above the door, and a faint set of boot prints in the dirt that circled the cabin once before vanishing into the woods. I didn't bother calling the sheriff. The one time I met him, Sheriff Danvers, mid-60s and half asleep, he told me with a chuckle that we don't really do much policing out here. Said if I had a problem, I should call Dale, or just show him a shotgun, and they'll move along. Typical small-town shrug-off. I decided I needed more than battery-powered cams, so I drove to the nearest hardware store, 30 minutes away, and bought 2 wired cameras, a floodlight and motion sensors. Spent all afternoon drilling and wiring them up. One covered the porch directly, another aimed at the tree line. The motion sensor I mounted under the porch roof. Any movement near the door would light the whole place up. I felt better that night. Still anxious, but at least like I had control again. I sat in the living room with the porch feed open on my tablet, and my pistol on the coffee table. Nothing happened at 2 a.m. Nothing happened at 3. But at 3:47, the motion alert buzzed. I tapped the screen, and the feed from the treeline camera flickered on. He was standing at the edge of the woods, not moving, just watching the cabin. His hoodie was gone this time. He wore a flannel jacket, dirty, torn at the sleeves. His face was mostly hidden by shadow, but I could make out the shape of his mouth, slightly open, like he was breathing slow and deep. The moment the floodlight triggered, he stepped back into the darkness. He knew the sensor range. He was testing me. I didn't sleep again that night. I stayed up until dawn, then walked the property with the pistol in hand. Nothing. Just the prints again. Deep, deliberate, circling the house like a predator testing a cage. I called Dale again. This time he answered. When I told him what was going on, he went quiet. "You sure it's not a bear or something?" he asked. "Dale." He unplugged my camera, unscrewed my porch light. He knocked. A long pause. "All right," he finally said. "I'll stop by tonight. We'll keep watch together. Might just be some sicko from out of town. Seen it before. They like quiet places." He came by that evening just before sunset. Brought his old Remington and a thermos of black coffee. We sat on the porch until it got too cold, then moved inside and watched the feeds together. Dale didn't talk much, just watched with that same hard stare he always had. By 2:30 he was snoring in the recliner. At 3:18 the motion alert buzzed. I leaned over, tapped the screen. Nothing. Just the wind. I switched cameras. Still nothing. Then I realized the feed from the garage camera was gone. Black screen, just like the porch feed 2 nights ago. I stood slowly and crossed to the front window. The garage was only 30 feet from the house. A small single-door thing with no windows. I squinted into the dark. Then I saw it. The side door of the garage, the one I hadn't used in weeks, was slightly open. A sliver of darkness within darkness. I reached down and nudged Dale awake. He grunted, blinked at me. "Garage," I whispered. "Cameras down. Side doors open." He was awake instantly. Grabbed the Remington, racked it. We moved together toward the door, slow and silent. I turned off the porch light so we wouldn't silhouette ourselves. We stepped outside into the cold. The air was still. No crickets, no wind. We moved around the house in a wide arc, staying out of direct line with the garage door. When we reached the side wall of the garage, Dale held up a hand. He pointed to the door. It was open wider now, too wide. Then, from inside we heard something fall. A soft metallic clatter. Someone was inside. Dale raised the shotgun. I grabbed his arm. "Wait," I whispered. "If he's in there, he's cornered." But Dale shook me off. He moved to the door, crouched and peeked in fast, then pulled back. He looked at me and mouthed one word, empty. Then he pointed toward the back wall. I followed his finger. There was a hole in the wall, newly cut, the edges jagged. He didn't break in, he broke out. Dale stepped inside the garage first, gun raised, flashlight sweeping the corners. I followed close behind, heart hammering in my throat. The place was a mess, not like I remembered it. My tools had been moved. The tarp I kept over the lawnmower was half pulled off. Empty food wrappers lay on the floor. Candy bars, granola bars, things I hadn't touched in weeks. He'd been living in there, squatting. I saw a makeshift bedroll in the corner behind some boxes. A milk crate flipped upside down with a flashlight on top. Batteries, a knife, rope, and that hole in the back wall. Jagged broken wood about the size of a man's shoulders, punched clean through to the brush behind the garage. Dale swore under his breath. We circled the place twice, but he was gone. Slipped out before we got there. Probably watched us coming. I didn't sleep at all after that. Dale stayed the rest of the night. He didn't leave until noon the next day. Told me to stay armed, keep the cameras live, and call him if I saw anything else. For the next 3 nights I kept all the lights on, locked every door, slept in shifts. I saw nothing. No more camera drops. No more knocking. No footprints. Just silence. I started to think maybe we'd scared him off. That Dale showing up with a shotgun made the guy think twice. Maybe he moved on to the next poor soul in the next town over. Then, on the 4th night, I woke up at 1:17 a.m. to silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind where your body knows something is wrong before your mind catches up. I checked my phone. No motion alerts. No camera failures. I got up and did a quick check of the monitors anyway. All feeds running fine. But something still felt off. Then I noticed something. The garage door, the big one, facing the driveway, was open. Just a few feet, but open. The camera showed it swaying slightly in the breeze. I froze. I knew I had closed it, locked it in fact. I grabbed my pistol and flicked on the porch light. I stepped outside, slow and careful, and crept down the side of the house. The wind had picked up a little, rustling the trees. My boots crunched too loud on the gravel. I paused just before the edge of the driveway, raised my flashlight, and swung it toward the garage. The door was now open all the way. I hadn't heard a thing. I raised the pistol and started to move. That's when I saw him, standing just outside the floodlight range behind the open garage door, almost entirely concealed in the dark, watching me. He didn't run this time, didn't move at all, just stared. Something in me snapped. I stepped forward, flashlight and pistol aimed straight at him. "I've called the cops," I lied. "I've got your face on camera. You so much as move." That's when he did move. He didn't run. He walked, calmly, not toward me, toward the trees, back into the woods like it was nothing. No fear, no rush, just leaving. And that scared me more than anything, because he wasn't trying to rob me, or hurt me in some fit of rage. He was playing, testing me, seeing how long he could get away with being in my space without being caught. He wasn't there to steal. He wanted to be inside, to live in the walls, the garage, the silence. I watched him disappear into the trees. I called Dale. He was there in 15 minutes, armed, angry. We searched until dawn. We found an old campsite deep in the woods behind the property. Blankets, wrappers, a hunting knife, and a pair of shoes sitting neatly next to the fire pit. He was living out there, waiting, watching. That day, I packed a bag, locked the house, and drove 3 hours south to a friend's place in the city. I stayed for 2 weeks before coming back with a moving truck. I never slept in that house again. I never saw him again. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, when it's dead quiet and the world feels too still, I think about those knocks on my back door, and I wonder how long he was there. Before I noticed, not trying to get in, just enjoying the silence with me. I used to do long-haul driving before I got out of it. Not cross-country trucking, but overnight delivery gigs. Odd hours, long stretches of empty road, and more rest stops and sketchy diners than I can remember. I quit after one last job that nearly killed me. I've never told anyone about it, mostly because it sounds made up, and partly because saying it out loud still makes my skin crawl. This was about 5 years ago. I'd picked up a freelance delivery job from a guy in upstate New York. He paid cash and didn't ask many questions. Wanted a few sealed boxes dropped off 6 hours north, near the Vermont border. It was a straight shot, mostly highway, and I was supposed to get there before sunrise. No signature needed. Just drop off at a P.O. box in a locked community mail shed. I left around 10 p.m., driving a rented van. The night was quiet, rainy. The kind of slow, steady drizzle that makes the whole highway hum. About 2 hours in, I pulled over to stretch and hit a bathroom. There weren't many options on that stretch of road. No open truck stops, just a broken-down gas station and an old motel called The Pines. The neon vacancy sign was flickering behind a chain-link fence. One side of the sign was out, so it looked like it said VANC. I wasn't looking for a room, just somewhere to pee and maybe grab a snack. The lobby was open, dimly lit and smelled like mildew. There was no one at the front desk, but a little bell sat on the counter. I rang it once. The chime echoed too loud in the still air. After a minute of silence, I gave up and headed for the bathroom in the back. It was unlocked. The sink barely worked. I washed my hands, grabbed a couple of stale-looking snacks from a vending machine near the lobby, and headed back toward the van. That's when I saw the door at the far end of the hallway start to open. It creaked slowly, like someone was pushing it just enough to peek through. I froze. The hallway was dark, lined with room doors on both sides. That one at the end, it was marked 12, I think, opened about 6 inches, then stopped. I waited. Nothing happened. No sound, no voice. Then the door closed again. Quiet, precise. I stood there for a few more seconds, then turned and left. Back in the van, I told myself it was just a guest, or maybe a staff member being cautious. Who wouldn't be suspicious of a guy wandering around at 1 a.m. in a wet hoodie? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been watched. I got back on the road, but I hadn't gone more than 5 miles before the low fuel light blinked on. I swore out loud. The gauge had been glitchy on this van since I picked it up. I must have had less fuel than I thought. I doubled back to the gas station next to the motel, but when I pulled in, the lights were off, like fully off. The flickering sign, gone. The overhead lamps, dark. The entire building looked abandoned. Except it wasn't like that 15 minutes ago. I parked anyway, figuring maybe it was a power outage. The pumps were ancient, those old ones with the flip counters, and obviously offline. No digital display, no sound, just rain pattering on the roof, and the hum of my van's engine. I got out, pulled my hoodie up, and went to check the station door. Locked. There was a piece of paper taped to the glass from inside. Handwritten, faded and smudged from water damage. All I could make out was the word closed. No explanation, no hours, no date. Something about that didn't sit right. I turned to get back in the van, and saw a man standing behind it. He was just standing there behind the van, not moving. No umbrella, no coat, just standing in the rain, maybe 10 feet from the rear bumper, hands by his sides, head tilted slightly like he was trying to make sense of me. I froze. He wasn't old, maybe late 30s, plain clothes, dark jeans, a gray shirt that clung to him in the wet. No expression on his face, just blank, like he wasn't seeing me, or like I wasn't what he expected. I stepped slowly back toward the driver's side door, never taking my eyes off him. "Hey," I said, "you okay?" He didn't answer, didn't move. The rain picked up a little, turning everything into silver sheets under the weak gas station light. I kept one hand on the door handle, the other in my hoodie pocket where I kept my multi-tool. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Then he moved, not toward me, just around. He stepped slowly around the side of the van, dragging his hand lightly across the body as he went. His head turned as he walked, keeping me in his periphery. He was circling me. I got in the van and locked the doors. He came around the other side and stood by the passenger window, still watching, still saying nothing. I started the engine. He didn't flinch, didn't even seem to notice. Then he did the weirdest thing yet. He turned and walked away, not fast, not like he was retreating. He just strolled off, back across the parking lot, toward the motel, toward that hallway. He passed under the flickering light above the lobby door and disappeared inside. I didn't follow. I got out of there. The van had just enough gas to make it another 15 miles before sputtering, but I made it to a 24-hour station near a small diner. I filled up, got some coffee, and tried to brush off what had just happened. People are weird, I told myself. Maybe the guy was high. Maybe the motel just had sketchy guests. Either way, I was done with that place. I finished the delivery a few hours later, dropped the boxes off at the PO shed as instructed, and drove straight home. I didn't take any more jobs for a while. Didn't even think about the Pines until a few weeks later when I passed through the area again and decided against better judgment to check it out in daylight. Only, there was no motel. Not anymore. Where the Pines had stood was now a construction site. The gas station was still there, boarded up with a for sale sign out front. But the lot next door, leveled, just a dirt patch with a bulldozer and piles of gravel. I walked the edge of the site, thinking maybe I was in the wrong place. Then I saw the sign, faded, cracked, half buried in the mud by the fence. VAANC. Same sign, same shape, same place. The motel had been torn down. But that wasn't the strangest part. According to the site's renovation sign, the motel had been demolished 18 months ago. I stood there staring at the sign, trying to make sense of the timeline. I had been there 3 weeks ago, walked the halls, saw the vending machine, talked, or tried to talk to that man, but the building was gone. Had been for over a year. I don't spook easy. I've slept in parking lots, back seats, and abandoned rest stops without blinking. But standing there in broad daylight, staring at a torn-down motel I had definitely walked through 3 weeks earlier, that rattled me. I thought maybe I was losing it. Maybe I had dreamed the whole thing. But dreams don't leave vending machine snack wrappers in your glove box. I still had the half-eaten pack of mini donuts I'd bought that night. The receipt was in my hoodie pocket, time-stamped, location printed clear as day. Pines Roadside Services. I couldn't let it go. Back home, I started digging, searching online for the Pines Motel, anything in the area that matched. Most of the results were dead ends, travel listings, blurry photos from 10 years ago. But one link stood out, an archived newspaper article from the Adirondack Chronicle, dated almost 2 years back. The headline, "Foul Play Suspected in Motel Arson, the Pines Destroyed After Series of Mysterious Incidents." I clicked. The article detailed a string of strange events leading up to the fire. Disappearing guests, staff complaints about unwelcome visitors, and rumors of a man who would wander the property at night, entering unlocked rooms without ever being caught. The owners reported seeing him on camera but could never find him afterward. When police finally did a sweep, they found makeshift beds in the crawl spaces. One report claimed someone had been living in the walls. The motel burned down weeks later. Cause unknown. They suspected arson but never confirmed who did it. The owners left town. Lawsuit tied up the sale. Then the lot sat vacant until a developer bought it 18 months ago. I just sat there, staring at the screen. My hands were shaking. That man I saw in the rain, he wasn't just wandering the lot. He was still there, still doing what he'd always done. And I had stepped right into his routine without knowing it. For months after, I couldn't drive past empty buildings without scanning the windows. Couldn't sleep in a quiet room without checking every closet, every cabinet. Once I left the light on in my hallway and woke up to find it unscrewed, just sitting on the floor. No sign of a break-in. I know what I experienced was real. The donut wrapper, the receipt, the van's GPS log. I have the records. The trip happened, but the motel, it doesn't exist anymore. And yet, I stayed there. Now, whenever I see one of those sketchy old roadside motels off the highway, half-lit signs, empty lots, I drive right past them. No stops, no bathroom breaks, because I know some buildings don't die clean, and some people never leave them. Not really, not even when they're gone. The property was beautiful. That was the first mistake. 30 acres of overgrown fields and woodland, an hour's drive from the nearest town. The farmhouse sat at the end of a winding dirt road with no neighbors, no cell reception, and no sound but the wind. For a guy like me, freshly divorced and craving isolation, it was perfect. Too perfect. I'd found the listing late one night, some foreclosure being auctioned off by a bank out of state. Dirt cheap, no photos inside, but the outside looked solid. I didn't care much about aesthetics. I wanted space, quiet, a reset. The place came as is. I signed the paperwork, picked up the keys from a lockbox, and moved in the following week. It was only after the first night that I realized something was off. It started with the motion light. There was one mounted on the back of the house facing the tree line. I didn't install it. It came with the place, but every night, around the same time, it would click on. Nothing visible in the yard, no animals, just the dull click and the wash of light through my bedroom window. At first I figured it was wind, or branches swaying, but it happened too consistently, always between 2 and 2:30 a.m., always staying on a little longer than made sense, like someone was just out of sight, watching. By the fourth night, I started to feel it, that pressure in your chest when you know something's wrong but you can't prove it, like your instincts are trying to scream while your brain keeps telling you it's fine. So I bought a floodlight and installed it above the back door. I didn't want to be caught in the dark if I needed to go outside. I also brought out my old trail cam from storage, just a cheap one from my hunting days. I strapped it to a tree about 20 feet from the house and angled it toward the backyard. The next morning, I checked the SD card. There were 4 captures. The first 3 were deer. The fourth was blank. Just blackness. That was strange because the camera had night vision. It shouldn't have gone dark. And yet the timestamp was 2:16 a.m., exactly when the motion light clicked on. That night I stayed up. Not in bed. Not in the living room. I sat just inside the back door, shotgun beside me, lights off, watching. At 2:14, the light clicked on. No noise, no movement, just the sudden bloom of white across the trees. I stayed frozen in place. Then something moved, barely, just a flicker of shadow along the far tree line, low to the ground. I squinted. It wasn't an animal, not that size. It moved slow, deliberate, like it was crawling. I raised the shotgun and stepped out onto the porch. Nothing. The light was still on. The yard was empty. But when I turned toward the tree where I'd mounted the trail cam, the camera was gone. I stared at the empty patch of bark for a full 10 seconds before my brain caught up. The straps that had held the trail cam were still there, dangling loose, cleanly cut, not torn, not chewed, cut. That was no animal. I scanned the yard, then the woods, then slowly back toward the house, shotgun still up. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. The silence was suffocating. Once inside, I locked the door and didn't sleep. The next morning I went out to look again. No tracks, no camera, just that strange hollow quiet the property always had in the mornings. It made me realize something. The woods weren't empty. They were watching. I called the local sheriff, not to file a report, just to get some kind of presence out there. Sheriff Monroe was polite enough, but unimpressed. "This place has been empty for 2 years," he said. "Teenagers like to mess around out there. You see anyone again, give me a call. But unless someone breaks in, I can't really do much." He told me to lock my doors and maybe get a dog. A dog wasn't going to help me sleep. That afternoon I checked all the windows and doors again, installed new locks, replaced the batteries in every flashlight I had, loaded up on supplies at the town store. By the time I got back, the sun was going down. That's when I noticed it. One of the basement windows, those tiny rectangular ones low to the ground, was open, just an inch. But I hadn't opened it. In fact, I didn't even know the basement had a window on that side. I went inside, grabbed my flashlight, and walked around the outside of the house. There it was, tucked just beneath the overgrown shrubs, half hidden in shadow. The screen had been pried off, lying in the dirt nearby. Someone had been trying to get in, or maybe they already had. I rushed back inside and yanked open the basement door. The air was cold, stale. That damp, earthy smell you only get in old basements that haven't been aired out in years. I stepped down slowly, light sweeping across boxes, broken shelves, a rusted-out furnace. Nothing moved, no sound but the creak of the old wood under my feet. I checked every corner, nothing. But when I got to the far wall, my flashlight caught something that didn't belong. A piece of twine, tied to a nail sticking out of the support beam. On the other end of the twine was something small, rectangular. I stepped closer. It was my trail cam, dangling there, like someone had hung it on purpose. I turned it over. The lens was cracked. The SD card was still in it. I pulled it out and went straight back upstairs. I didn't stop to eat. I didn't check my phone. I plugged the SD card into my laptop and opened the file directory. Only one file was on it, dated last night. No timestamp, no metadata. I clicked. The video opened in blackness. For 5 seconds, nothing. Then grainy shapes began to emerge. Trees, grass, the faint outline of the house. Someone was holding the camera, not mounted, not stationary. The footage tilted slowly upward, toward the back of the house, my house. Then it started moving forward, creeping across the yard, closer and closer, past the floodlight's range, and then it stopped. The figure turned the camera toward the house, angled it up, and aimed it right at the back door. The screen stayed fixed there for 15 more seconds. Then something moved in the reflection on the glass. Something inside the house. The camera holder wasn't filming the door. They were watching someone already inside. I shut the laptop. There was no way. I was the only one here. I had locked every door, checked every room. I hadn't seen anyone on the property, had I? Still, something about the video kept needling at me. That reflection in the glass. It was subtle, barely visible, but it looked like someone standing in the kitchen, just outside the frame of the back door, unmoving, watching. I tried to tell myself it was my own reflection, maybe a trick of the light, but I knew better. I slept with the shotgun beside me that night, if you can even call it sleep. Every creak of the old farmhouse made my skin crawl. I kept the hallway light on and sat in the chair across from the stairs, eyes on the door. Nothing happened, but I didn't feel alone. Around 4 a.m., I heard something shift below the floorboards. A soft muffled creak. Not a pipe, not a mouse. Wood. Wait. It came from the basement. I didn't go down. I waited until sunrise, shotgun in hand, every nerve wired tight. The moment light came through the windows, I unlocked the basement door and flipped on the stairwell light. Silence. I crept down, every board groaning under my feet. The flashlight beam swayed side to side. The trail cam was gone again. The twine that had been holding it was dangling from the nail, cut clean through. I moved faster now, flashlight and gun ready, checking corners, behind old boxes, around the furnace. And that's when I saw the footprints, damp, muddy, leading across the concrete floor toward the back corner of the basement. They vanished into the shadows where the wall met the foundation. I scanned the spot with my light and found something I hadn't noticed before. A square outline in the wall, rough edges, mismatched wood, a false panel. I crouched, breath shallow, and pried it open with the butt of the flashlight. Behind it, a crawl space, narrow, dusty, just big enough for someone to slide through. The air that came out of it was cold and sour, like something had been living in there for far too long. I didn't go in. I slammed the panel shut, nailed it closed and dragged a steel shelf in front of it. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, the floodlight clicked on again. And this time when I looked out the back window, there was a man standing in the yard. He stood right at the edge of the yard, half lit by the floodlight, half shrouded in the dark. I couldn't make out his face, but his posture, it was calm, casual, like he'd been waiting for me to notice. I didn't move, didn't breathe. He wasn't holding anything, didn't raise a weapon, or shout threats, just stood there, still, watching me from 30 feet away. I raised the shotgun and opened the back door just enough to yell through it, "You need to leave." He didn't react. "I've got a gun," I said louder. "Sheriff's already been here." Nothing. I took one step out onto the porch, and that's when he slowly raised his hand, not in surrender. He lifted one arm and pointed to the left, toward the side of the house. Then he turned and walked back into the woods without a sound. I bolted inside, locked the door, and went straight for the hallway window that overlooked the left side of the house. I didn't see anyone, but when I stepped outside in the morning, after another sleepless night, I found something. Footprints, coming from the woods, stopping directly below that very window, and right beneath it, in the damp soil, was a long metal hook, the kind people use to hang lanterns or planters on porches. It had been stabbed into the ground at an angle, tilted upward, like someone had tried to use it to reach the window, or test how far up they could get. There were scratch marks along the wood paneling, just beneath the windowsill. That was the moment it finally hit me. Whoever this was, they weren't just lurking outside for fun. They were practicing, planning, testing the house, the windows, the routine. I called Sheriff Monroe again. He came out the next afternoon and did a full walk around with me. Found the same tracks, same marks. "Could be a drifter," he said, "or a squatter who thinks you're trespassing on their turf." "Can you send a patrol out here at night?" I asked. He shook his head. "Too far out. We don't have the staff for it. You see someone again, you shoot. That's your right out here." Helpful. That night, I didn't sit in the living room. I didn't hide in the kitchen or stare through windows. I sat in the hallway, back to the wall, knees up, shotgun across my lap, staring at the basement door. Because I realized something else. This whole time I'd been watching the outside. But what if he was already back inside? The basement door hadn't opened, not that I'd heard, but the lock didn't look the same anymore. I'd been checking it every night. Metal latch, old keyhole. But that night the latch was slightly askew. Not broken, just moved. At 2:03 a.m., the floodlight clicked on again. I didn't even look outside this time. I kept my eyes on the hallway, and then I heard it. A sound I still can't describe fully even now. It wasn't loud, just a soft shifting scrape, like denim brushing over wood, or a shoe sliding carefully across a step. It came from below, from the basement stairs. I raised the shotgun, stood up, and stepped to the side of the basement door. If it opened, I'd have a clear shot from the angle. My breath was shallow, ears straining, then it stopped. No more scraping, just silence. I stood there for what felt like forever. Then a single soft knock came from the other side of the door. I didn't answer, didn't move, didn't even blink. Another knock, this one louder, heavier, and then the knob turned. The door stayed shut, locked, but the knob jiggled with force. Then again faster, like someone had expected it to open easily. I braced myself, finger against the trigger guard, but after a few more shakes, it stopped. No footsteps back down the stairs, no retreat. Just that same dead silence pressing in from all sides. Minutes passed, then an hour. Eventually the sun came up. I called Monroe again. He didn't sound surprised. "We've had reports before," he said. "Few years back some survivalist guy was living off-grid out there. Place sat empty for a long time after he disappeared. We never found him." "What do you mean disappeared?" I asked. "He just stopped showing up. No one saw him leave, no vehicle. House was empty when we got there. Figured he moved on." I told him what happened. He came back out, this time with another deputy. They searched the crawl space behind the wall where I'd found the trail cam, dug into it this time, and they found something. A small dugout channel leading under the foundation. Room enough for someone to slither through. Inside were cans, bedding, empty wrappers, a flashlight, a knife, and a pair of night vision goggles. The sheriff didn't say much after that, just shook his head, told me to get out if I could. I didn't argue. I sold the place 3 weeks later. Cash offer. Never met the buyer. Haven't been back since. But sometimes when I wake up around 2 a.m. in a quiet house, my mind drifts back there, back to that empty field, to the trees beyond the floodlight. And I wonder, how long had he been living there before I moved in? And how many nights did I sleep while he crawled beneath my floorboards, listening, waiting? I'd been house-sitting for my sister for 3 days. When it started, her place was one of those modern homes in a gated community. That really just meant a chain-link fence and a keypad on a pole. Nice enough neighborhood, still being developed. Lots of open construction, empty plots, and new homes with no one living in them yet. She and her husband had flown to Europe for a week. My job was simple: feed the dog, bring in mail, water the stupid plants she was somehow keeping alive in triple-digit heat. I didn't mind. I'd been between jobs anyway. Figured the solitude would help me clear my head. Think. The first few nights were uneventful. I kept a low profile, mostly stuck to the living room. I'd walk the dog before bed and lock up tight. The front door had a smart lock, and the alarm system was easy enough to use. But on the third night, I noticed something strange. I'd gone for a run just after sunset. No music, just the sound of my feet hitting pavement. The streets were quiet, still mostly unoccupied. A lot of empty houses. About halfway through the loop, I passed one of the unfinished homes. 2-story shell. No lights, no siding yet, just framing and plywood. But as I passed it, I felt, watched. I paused and looked back. There was someone standing on the second floor. No lights, no movement, just a silhouette in the raw wood frame, staring down at me through the open beams. I couldn't make out any details. Could have been a construction worker, I told myself. Maybe someone checking the property, but something about it didn't feel right. I jogged home a little faster. That night, I double-checked the alarm system, made sure all the doors were locked. I even closed the blinds, which I never do. But sometime around 1 a.m., the dog, Millie, a border collie mix, started growling. Not barking, not whining, growling, deep and low, from the base of her throat. like she smelled something I couldn't. She was staring at the sliding glass door. I got up, heart already thudding, and approached it quietly. The backyard was dark. No porch light on that side of the house, but the motion light was supposed to come on. If anything moved, I squinted, and for a moment, I thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the yard, just inside the fence, not moving. Then the motion light flicked on. There was nothing there. No footprints on the lawn. Millie was still growling, now pacing in small circles. I stayed up the rest of the night with a kitchen knife beside me, feeling more and more sure that the person I'd seen earlier had followed me home. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. A trick of the shadows, a raccoon, maybe even my nerves getting the best of me after being alone for too long. But Millie wasn't the anxious type. She wasn't a puppy, and I'd never seen her act like that before. Circling, tail stiff, ears perked like she was waiting for something to break through the glass. After breakfast, I walked the yard. Nothing. No sign anyone had been there. The grass was dry and patchy, but undisturbed. The gate was still latched from the inside, and the motion light was still working. I even went so far as to reset the alarm system, just in case. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. The image of that person standing inside the half-built house haunted me. Their stillness, the height, how they just watched. That afternoon, I called my sister. Has anyone ever messed with the house before? Break-ins? Weird neighbors? She paused. No. Why? No reason. I lied. Just heard something outside last night. You're not scaring Millie, are you? She joked. But I wasn't laughing. That night, I decided to test something. I left the porch light off on purpose, closed all the blinds except one in the back bedroom. Millie was restless again, pacing by the front door. I killed the TV and sat in the dark with a notepad, pretending to read, but really listening. At 12:43 a.m., Millie let out a low growl, exactly like the night before. I walked to the window with the blinds slightly cracked and peeked out into the side yard. I couldn't see much, just the fence, the moonlit outline of the neighbor's garbage cans. Then I caught a flicker of movement. I held my breath and leaned closer. A man was standing in the side yard, halfway behind the neighbor's bushes, not moving, not walking, just watching the house. He wasn't dressed like a thief. No ski mask, no gear, just a t-shirt and jeans, hands at his sides. His posture was what disturbed me most. Upright and neutral, no tension, no urgency, as if he had all the time in the world. I pulled back slowly, heart hammering. I crawled to the other side of the room and grabbed my phone, already dialing 911, but the call wouldn't go through. One bar. I moved to the front hallway. No signal. Kitchen. Nothing. Even the back door by the glass sliding panels, still dead. I didn't understand. I'd had decent reception out there the last few days. I even watched YouTube videos while cooking the day before. I turned on the Wi-Fi and tried a text to my sister. Someone's outside, trying to get in. It failed to send. I locked the bedroom door and crouched by the bed, every nerve on edge. Then I heard the side gate rattle, just a little. Millie let out a sharp bark and ran toward the door. I followed, heart pounding, every step like ice up my spine. He was standing by the gate now, trying the latch. He wasn't even subtle about it. I turned on the backyard floodlights. The moment they lit up, he looked straight into the camera above the back door, dead into it, then smiled and walked away. Didn't run, didn't hide, just walked back toward the street, like nothing happened. It took an hour for my hands to stop shaking. I barely slept, and when I reviewed the camera footage in the morning, there was no recording. The camera system had been working fine for days. I'd even tested it when I first arrived, waved in front of the porch cam, watched myself in real time on my phone. But now, the footage from last night just cut out. At 12:41 a.m., the feed froze. It resumed at 1:03. The man's visit, gone. No footage of the side yard. The gate, nothing. I tried accessing the raw logs on the app, but they'd been wiped too. I couldn't make sense of it. It felt deliberate, not a glitch, not bad Wi-Fi. Someone had disabled it. And then I noticed something worse. When I walked around the side of the house, the back panel of the security box, the one hidden behind the utility shed, was hanging open. 3 wires had been cut cleanly. He knew where the system was. He knew how to kill it, which meant this wasn't random. He wasn't just casing homes in the area. He was targeting this house, targeting me. I walked the neighborhood in broad daylight, trying to clear my head. But even with the sun up, the place felt wrong. Too many empty houses, too many sightlines from unfinished construction, corners you couldn't see around. Every hammer tap from a distant build made me jump. When I passed the unfinished house again, the one I'd seen him in originally, I stopped. The second story was open. Still no glass in the frames, just beams and exposed insulation. But now there was something new hanging from the upper floor. A strip of cloth. It fluttered slightly in the breeze, barely noticeable, but it was a shirt. My shirt. The same one I'd thrown into the hamper 2 nights earlier. After my run, I stared at it from the street, heart sinking. He'd been inside. While I slept, while I thought I was locking everything down and staying alert, he'd walked right past me, into the house, into the laundry room, taken it like a trophy. I ran back, adrenaline cutting through me like ice. This wasn't fear anymore. It was war. I made a plan. That night, I set traps. I wedged glasses behind the door. I slid bells onto the gate latch. I placed baking powder across the floor, by the back entrance, where any footstep would leave a mark. I kept the fire poker near the bed. I moved the butcher knife into the nightstand. And then I waited. Millie was already acting off. Refused to eat, paced constantly, stayed glued to me. She curled by the foot of the bed, but didn't sleep. Neither did I. At 2:17 a.m., I heard the back latch snap open. Soft, intentional, not forced. He had the key. The door creaked open next. I held my breath. No alarm, no camera. The house was dark, but I heard the footsteps. 1 step, 2. Then silence. Then glass clinked in the front hallway. He'd entered through the rear and moved past the kitchen. Now he was near the stairs. I reached down for the knife and held it close, crouched behind the open closet door in the bedroom. The house was too quiet. Every creak of the floor echoed like thunder in my ears. I heard Millie growl low from her spot. Then, the sound of bare feet on the tile. He wasn't wearing shoes. That chilled me more than anything else. He came here ready. I didn't move. The bedroom was dark, except for the faint glow of the clock on the wall. I stayed crouched behind the cracked closet door, heart pounding so violently, I thought he might hear it. Millie was curled low beside the dresser, lips peeled back in a silent snarl. Then I saw him, a sliver of movement through the hallway. Just his shadow at first, sliding past the doorway. No flashlight, no phone light. He knew the layout. He'd planned this. The floor creaked beneath his weight. Not heavy, but steady, slow, almost deliberate, like he was trying to drag this out. I clenched the knife in my hand, breath shallow. He stepped into the doorway. From my angle behind the closet, I saw only part of him. Bare legs, jeans rolled at the cuffs, no shoes, just dirt-caked feet. His shirt was dark, long-sleeved, and in his hand, a crowbar. Not a gun, not a knife, a blunt, personal weapon, something he'd use up close. He paused at the door, like he was listening for my breathing. I kept my lips tight, eyes locked on the space between the door and the wall. He took 1 step into the room. That was when Millie launched. No bark, just a flash of movement and teeth. She hit him low in the leg, and he shouted, more in surprise than pain. The crowbar clattered against the wall as he stumbled back, trying to swing. That's when I moved. I charged from the closet, knife out, and slammed into him. He wasn't big, maybe 5'10", lean, but strong, wiry, with that manic energy of someone who didn't care if he lived or died. We hit the floor, and I tried to pin the knife into his side, but he caught my wrist. We struggled. His free hand went to my face, trying to gouge at my eyes. Millie was barking wildly now, lunging again. I twisted, using all my weight to drive the knife down. It missed, slid across his ribs. He grunted and bucked, flipping me over. Now he was on top. The crowbar was just inches away. He reached for it, fingers brushing the metal. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and smashed it into his head. It didn't knock him out, but it stunned him long enough for me to scramble up. I kicked the crowbar across the room and stabbed again, this time catching his arm. He howled and rolled away. Blood hit the floor. Real blood. Human. He tried to stand, but I didn't give him the chance. I kicked him in the chest, once, twice, then grabbed the poker from the side of the fireplace and raised it. "Don't get up," I said, my voice shaking. He didn't. He just laughed, low, raspy. "Figured you'd be easy." That was all he said before I hit him across the face. The sheriff's department didn't arrive for another 25 minutes. I called from the front yard, pacing in the cold, knife still in my hand, Millie leaning against my leg. They arrested him there on the spot. He had zip ties in his back pocket, a burner phone, no wallet, no ID. He wouldn't give his name, wouldn't say why he chose this house, but he'd done it before. They found photos of other homes on his phone, ones that matched a string of break-ins across the state. In most cases, no one was home. This time he was wrong. They kept him in custody for 72 hours before the FBI got involved. Turns out he wasn't just breaking into houses. He was stalking them, studying patterns, mapping security systems, backyards, pet routines. He'd done it to at least 4 families across 2 states. He wasn't after money. He was after control. The kind of predator who enjoyed the anticipation, who got off on watching people feel safe, knowing he could take it away whenever he wanted. The photos they recovered from his burner phone weren't just surveillance shots. Some were taken inside homes, bedrooms, bathrooms, people sleeping. I gave my full statement twice, once to the sheriff, once to the agents. They were professional, but you could tell they were shaken too. One of them, a younger guy with a clipped mustache, said I was lucky. "Most people don't walk out of that kind of situation." He said, "You made the right moves, but I didn't feel lucky." Even now, weeks later, back in my own apartment, I still triple check every lock. I got rid of the smart home system and went full analog. Deadbolts, physical blinds, battery-powered lights. I keep a bat by the front door and a knife under my pillow. Sleep hasn't come easy. Millie's back with my sister now. She's calm again, but whenever I visit, she doesn't leave my side. My sister offered to install a new camera system. I told her not to bother. If someone wants in that bad, no camera's going to stop them. But there was one moment that stuck with me more than any other. A few days after the attack, I returned to her place to pick up the rest of my things. The house was quiet, still, sunlight through the windows. Everything where it belonged, except in the bedroom closet, behind a loose panel of drywall. I found a small metal box, inside an old flip phone, turned off, no charger, just sitting there. I handed it over to the police. They're still checking if it belonged to him, or someone else before me, because the house had only been built a year earlier. But the phone had photos on it, and none of them were mine. Different people, different rooms. Some looked like they were taken through windows, others through cracks in closet doors. All dated at least 6 months before my sister moved in. So maybe I didn't win. Maybe I was just next on the list. I still replay that night sometimes, wondering what would have happened if Millie hadn't growled, if the lamp hadn't been there, if I hadn't moved fast enough. He would have tied me up, waited until morning. No one would have heard, no one would have known. But I did fight, and I'm still here, and sometimes, that's enough. I never wanted the cabin. I hadn't even known it existed until the letter arrived. It came from a lawyer in North Carolina. Old-style envelope, thick with documents. My Uncle Robert had passed, and apparently I was the next of kin. We weren't close. I barely remembered him beyond a handful of uncomfortable family gatherings when I was a kid. Quiet guy, kept to himself. The kind of relative you only ever heard about through rumors. He lives in the mountains. Used to teach. Something happened to him back in '96. Nobody ever said what. The cabin was tucked away near the Blue Ridge, on a stretch of land that didn't even show up on Google Maps. According to the legal paperwork, He'd lived there alone for over 20 years. No mortgage, no family, no friends, just the forest. There was a line scribbled in pen on the envelope, not typed like the rest. "Don't stay after dark." I thought it was a joke, maybe something my uncle wrote as part of his will. Just a weird final touch from a man who'd clearly gone full hermit. But I remembered it later. I remembered it very clearly. The drive took most of the day, winding roads, no cell service, no signs for the last 30 minutes. The sun was already dipping low when I found the old turnoff, a narrow gravel path almost swallowed by trees. The cabin appeared like a secret, old, but not falling apart. One floor, dark-stained wood, heavy front door, moss-covered steps, a small storage shed off to the side. The surrounding trees felt heavier than normal, denser. They pressed inward, as if the house had been planted there, and the woods had grown around it. Inside was dust, creaking floorboards, and the scent of old cedar. My uncle hadn't been a hoarder, but he'd lived simply. A wood stove, bookshelves full of strange old tomes, many without titles. Journals too, hundreds of them, all dated and stacked in neat rows along the walls. I set my bag down and walked the place slowly. It felt like walking through someone else's unfinished thoughts. Empty teacups still sat on shelves. An old coat hung on the back of the chair. The windows were all boarded from the inside, nailed tight. Oddest of all was the cellar door, padlocked with 3 rusted locks and painted over in red. There was something etched into the wood too, deep and crude like a carving done with a knife. A circle with jagged symbols inside. I didn't recognize it, didn't like it. I made the mistake of prying one board off a window to get some air. The moment I did, something shifted in the forest outside. No wind, just a change, like the trees were holding their breath. A cold came through the window that didn't match the late summer heat. I stepped back, then I remembered the note. "Don't stay after dark." I checked the clock. 7:13 p.m. The sun was dropping. I thought about leaving, just driving into town and coming back in the morning. But something about the place made me hesitate. I didn't want to leave it unattended, didn't want to admit it had gotten to me. So I locked the window, nailed the board back up, and made a fire in the stove. As the light drained from the sky, I started reading through one of the journals. The entries were short, frantic. "It's in the woods again. Heard it breathing near the porch. Don't open the door, no matter what it says." Another entry. "Midnight is when it crosses. Don't sleep then." And another, scribbled almost illegibly. "If you hear the bell, run." I closed the book. No power, no cell service, just the fire and the sound of trees shifting in the wind outside. Then I heard something move on the roof. A slow dragging step, then another. I didn't move. The fire crackled softly beside me, but my ears were locked on the creaking sound above my head. A footstep, then another, slow, deliberate pacing across the roof. Whatever it was, didn't sound heavy, but it sounded tall. Each step was separated by long pauses, like it was listening between moves. I reached for the poker from the fireplace. My hand trembled, not from the cold, but from the certainty, deep in my bones, that I wasn't supposed to be here. Not after dark, not in this place. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard a thud on the porch. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Another thud. Something was stepping down from the roof, onto the front deck. There was a thin strip of moonlight slipping in through the gap at the bottom of the door. And I saw it, just for a second. A long shadow. Something tall, angular. The silhouette of antlers, twisted and sharp, briefly cut across the light. Then, a knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks on the front door. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I just stared at the door like it would burst open any second. Another knock, louder. I backed up toward the hallway, heart pounding so loud it was hard to hear anything else. Then something worse happened. It spoke, a voice low and gravelly, like someone whispering through a throat full of broken glass. "Robert, open the door." It knew my uncle's name. "You can't hide forever." I whispered to myself, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But the floor creaked behind me. I spun around, holding the fire poker up like a weapon. Nothing there. just the hallway leading to the bedroom, and the cellar door at the far end. And that cellar door, the one with the red symbol, the locks were gone, all three of them. The paint looked freshly peeled, still wet around the edges. I hadn't heard it open, but it was open now, just a crack. Blackness yawned from the gap, cold air spilling out like it was breathing. I took a step back, then something whispered from the other side of the door. Not from the porch anymore, from the cellar. I'm already inside. I ran. I don't remember grabbing my bag or my keys, but I must have. I bolted out the back door and sprinted to my car, praying it would start. It did. I drove like a man possessed, tires sliding across gravel, headlights catching the trees as they seemed to close in around me. I didn't stop until I hit the main road again and saw the first street lamp flickering near a gas station. I slept in the car that night, parked under the lights, didn't go back to the cabin the next day, didn't go back for 3 days, but something about that place gnawed at me. It wasn't just fear. It was like something was unfinished, like whatever had spoken to me hadn't finished what it came to do, and part of me knew it wouldn't let me walk away that easily. 3 days passed before I worked up the nerve to return. I told myself it was just to drop the keys off with the lawyer, to hand it all over, and never look back. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I had to know what was really going on. If I didn't, it would haunt me anyway, forever. I drove up during the middle of the day, bringing with me a flashlight, a hammer, and a brand new padlock for the cellar. I left the engine running. As I approached the porch, the front door stood wide open. I hadn't left it that way. The place felt colder than it should have. Not from weather. There was an unnatural chill, like the cabin had been sealed in something wrong. Even the birds didn't sing. The trees, once alive with the sound of wind through leaves, now stood in perfect silence. I walked through the door. The fireplace was burned out. Cold ashes. The bookshelves looked untouched. The journals still stacked in their strange, obsessive rows. But the cellar door was fully open now, and etched across the inside of it, carved deep into the wood, was the same circle I'd seen on the outside. But this time, the jagged symbols glowed faintly red, like they'd been burned into the door from the other side. I should have left. I didn't. Flashlight raised. I stepped down into the cellar. The air changed instantly. It wasn't just cold. It was wrong. Heavy. Thick. Like something ancient had soaked into the foundation of this place. The wooden steps creaked beneath me, and each one felt like a countdown. I reached the bottom. The floor was made of packed dirt, worn smooth by time. The shelves down there were covered in dust and old mason jars, most of them sealed with wax, filled with strange dark materials, roots, bones, ash. And in the center of the room was a circle of stones, small, worn flat, arranged with unsettling precision. Inside the circle was a bell, a single iron bell, blackened with age, the handle wrapped in cloth. It sat upright, untouched. I felt drawn to it, like it wanted to be touched. But in my uncle's journal, I remembered the line, "If you hear the bell, run." I knelt beside it, careful not to cross the stone circle. Then I saw the notebook. It was lying just outside the circle, half covered in dirt. I picked it up. The entries were more recent. I made the pact to keep it trapped. Every night, it tries to find a new way out. The bell keeps it tethered. I don't know how much longer I can resist ringing it. Another entry. Near the end. If you're reading this, I failed. Don't ring the bell. That's when the whispers started. Soft, slithering, like voices coming from beneath the soil. I turned to leave, but the cellar door slammed shut above me. And from the shadows behind the shelves, something moved. Not walked. Shifted. Like it had no bones, only tendons and shadow. The flashlight flickered. The air dropped to freezing. Then the bell began to tremble, just slightly, like something was trying to ring it from below. I backed away from the bell, my flashlight flickering in and out. The circle of stones around it was starting to shake, the dirt beneath it rumbling faintly. It wasn't an earthquake. It was something beneath the earth, something alive. The whispering intensified. I couldn't make out exact words, but I could feel the intent. It wasn't just noise. It was a plea, a beckoning. Ring it. Let me in. I stumbled toward the stairs, heart pounding, only to find that the wooden cellar door had been sealed shut, not locked but fused. Like the seams of the house had melted together. My hammer couldn't crack it. The wood bent, but it didn't break. I wasn't alone down there. From behind the furnace, a shadow uncoiled. It didn't crawl. It flowed like smoke with weight. Limbs formed and unformed. Long twitching arms that dragged across the wall. A head, too tall for any human, tilted sideways as it stared at me with nothing but hollow gaps where eyes should have been. I pointed the flashlight directly at it. It didn't flinch, but I saw something under its skin, if you could even call it that. The texture was like wet burlap stretched over bone, pulsing, as if it were barely holding together, and I swear it smiled. It raised one hand and gestured to the circle. Then it spoke. He rang it, every night, to keep me bound. The voice came from inside my head, layered in echoes. It wasn't speaking with sound. It was pushing the words into my thoughts. Now, it's your turn. I felt my hand twitch. The urge to ring the bell was compulsive, invasive, like someone was peeling back layers of my willpower one by one. I squeezed my eyes shut and backed up against the wall, whispering, "You're not real. You're not real." The voice grew louder. I am what came before the trees. I am what waits beneath the roots. The flashlight shorted out completely. Total darkness. I heard the bell clink softly. Then again, not fully rung, just teased. A warning. Something scraped across the floor behind me. I reached into my bag blindly, pulling out the salt canister I had brought. An old habit from when my mother used to talk about cleansing spaces. Superstition, I thought. But now I hope superstition was real. I dumped a line of salt across the base of the stairs, circling myself in it as best I could. The air thickened. The whispering stopped. And for a moment, everything was still. Then a soft sound, almost like breathing. No, not quite. It was weeping. From the far end of the cellar, near the shelves, the sound of a man crying. I dared to open my eyes. A figure stood just beyond the reach of the salt. My uncle. He looked thinner than I remembered. His face sunken, eyes ringed in shadow. "I tried," he said, voice shaking. "I really tried." Then his skin split. Not with blood, with light. A blinding white fracture ran from his forehead down his chest. And from within, something began to emerge. "It's too late," he whispered. "It's already been unbound." The bell rang, once. The sound of the bell echoed through the cellar like thunder, underwater, low, deep, and somehow wrong. My ears rang with the aftershock. But it wasn't just sound I felt. It was movement, like something ancient had just opened its eyes beneath the floorboards. The salt line around me began to darken, hissing as if boiling from the inside. A wind, cold and sharp, spiraled through the room. Though no windows or vents were open, the light was gone, yet I could still see everything. Somehow, the glow from my uncle's fractured body cast an eerie pall over the room, growing brighter, brighter, until it burst, not like an explosion, but like a door tearing open, and something stepped through. It was tall, taller than any man, and thin to the point of wrongness. Its limbs were too long, its joints bending slightly the wrong way. Its face was masked in shadow, but behind it, I could feel intention. It wasn't mindless. It was watching. The air grew thick. The weight of it pushed down on my chest, until I fell to my knees. The thing moved toward the circle, slowly, reverently, and stepped over the stones. The boundary meant nothing now. It reached one crooked hand toward the bell, and without touching it, made it ring again. Bound no longer, it whispered into my thoughts. "The pact is broken." I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. That's when I remembered the journal in my hand. In the last page, scribbled hastily in faded ink, were 6 words: "Reverse the bell, shatter the seal." I looked at the bell again, the handle wrapped in that old cloth. I crawled toward it, fighting the invisible pressure. Inch by inch, the creature turned, noticing me now. It began to stretch, growing taller, wider, the cellar shrinking around it like paper, curling under flame. I grabbed the bell and ripped the cloth free. Symbols were carved into the metal handle, runes I didn't recognize, but they felt angry, reactive. With everything I had left, I slammed the bell against the stone floor. It shattered, not just cracked, exploded. The sound that followed wasn't a bell chime. It was a shriek, a high-pitched guttural scream that filled every atom of the room. The thing staggered backward. Its form began to break, splitting into jagged, smoky tendrils, as if it were being unraveled from reality itself. "You had your turn," it hissed. "Now you're the seal." And in that instant, I understood. Destroying the bell didn't banish it, it replaced it. I felt something stab into my chest, not physically, but deep, deep inside, like hooks sinking into my soul, rooting me to the dirt floor. My vision blurred, my limbs went numb, the cellar around me twisted into darkness. And then, I woke up, back in the living room. Morning sunlight was pouring in through the cracks of the boarded windows. Birds were singing. The fire had long since gone out. I stumbled outside, gasping, and got in my car. I never went back. The cabin was sold, bulldozed, the land left to overgrow.